Last week we talked about the hidden cost of saying yes. This week we're going to talk a little bit about faith, but we're going to talk mostly about leading from identity and not insecurity. There's a version of leadership that looks strong, but it's actually driven by insecurity. You see it everywhere. Overcommitment disguised as work ethic, control disguised as excellence, silence disguised as composure, or maybe even performance disguised as purpose. If I'm honest, I've led that way too. Most high performers do. And I'm not saying I'm always a high performer, but I strive to be. And when your identity is tied to that output, leadership becomes survival. You feel like you have to prove yourself every quarter, every meeting, every single conversation that you have. You feel like I have to be the best. And eventually that gets very exhausting. It's not physical at first, it's mostly internal. You start managing perception of people, or the perception that people have of you more than your impact. You start protecting your image more than developing the people under and around you. And you start chasing validation instead of building vision. And here's somewhat of the uncomfortable truth. Insecure leaders create insecure cultures, because whatever drives you multiplies. So, if fear drives you, your team will feel it. If comparison drives you, your team, also feels it. If ego drives you, your team will absorb it. But when security drives you, everything changes. Now here's where this gets a little deep. Real security doesn't come from a title, doesn't come from compensation, doesn't come from your performance reviews or LinkedIn updates or recognition. Those things fluctuate. And if your identity fluctuates with them, so will your leadership. Real security has to come from something that's fixed, something that's foundationally concrete. For me, that foundation is my faith. Not religion, not performance, not image, but faith. The belief that my worth was decided long before my last win or my last loss. That I'm loved by God, not because I led well this week, but because I'm His. And whether you share that belief or not, here's the leadership principle inside of it. When your identity is settled, your leadership stabilizes. What does that look like? You don't panic under pressure. You don't crumble under criticism. You don't inflate with praise, and you don't shrink with setbacks. You operate from steadiness, and steadiness is rare. Most leaders are reacting. It's true. Very reactive in most environments, especially our work environments. Very rarely are we able to be proactive, and that's just the truth of it. It's hard. Every day, as a leader, I'm pulled in 100 different directions. So focusing on one thing is almost impossible. So very few leaders are actually anchored, and anchored leaders don't always need to dominate the room. They don't need to win every debate. They don't need to remind everyone that I'm in charge. They lead with a calm authority because they're not there to prove anything. So let me say something to you that might challenge you. If you constantly feel the need to prove yourself, you probably haven't settled who you are. Really who you are internally. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. We're always growing. We're always learning. But it does mean that there's a lot of work to do, right? Faith, for me, settled that work. When you understand that your value is not tied to your performance, here's what happens. You stop leading from fear of losing relevance. You stop making decisions just to look strong. You stop overcorrecting every mistake. You start leading from conviction instead of insecurity. And there's a passage that says, perfect love casts out fear. Think about that in a leadership context. If fear's casting votes in your decisions, what would love look like instead? If fear says protect your position, love says develop your people. If fear says control the outcome, love says empower and trust. And if fear says hide weakness, love says model growth. Something that I get very often is when I take this approach, it seems like soft leadership. No, you're too friendly. You're a pushover. You say yes to everything. You take on anything anyone needs from you. And sometimes that is true. I approach every situation with love first, but there is a point that you're going to get to with me where I've had enough and I'm going to stand my ground. I'm not going to do it with anger. I'm going to do it with data. I'm going to do it with facts. And I may not win every one of those situations, every one of those arguments, but I can't really fail when failure is a learning experience. Secure leadership builds resilient teams. And that's what I strive to bring to my organization. So here's a part that a lot of people probably won't say out loud. You can't lead others from a place you haven't personally stabilized. And that's hard. As a father, as a husband, my days are full from the time I open my eyes till the time I lay my head down on the pillow. I am 100% engaged for the people that need me. And the very little time that I get to myself is usually after those people have gone to bed at night. And that usually looks like a quick drive to the gym where I try to absorb as much time as I have. Sometimes that's an hour, sometimes it's 2 hours in the gym. Because I know that if I can push myself physically, mentally the next day, I will be stronger. I may be physically tired the next day, but mentally I've grown a little bit. So if you're internally chaotic, your leadership will be externally reactive. If you're internally insecure, your leadership will be externally controlling. If you're internally grounded, though, your leadership will be externally steady. Think about that. This isn't about theology, it's about your foundation. Where does your worth come from? If it comes from success, you're going to feel failure much more. If it comes from repetition, you'll feel criticism. And it'll be harder to step out of that comfort zone. And most of the time where we grow is outside of our comfort zone. If it comes from comparison, you're never going to rest. There's always somebody with a little bit better idea, a little bit better approach. But being steady in your decisions and bringing your identity to the table, to the conversation, that's unique. So it has to come from something eternal, something settled. And that makes you dangerous in the best way possible. Because now you can take risks without panicking. You can admit your mistakes without collapse, and that's a big one. Not enough people in the workplace take responsibility for their mistakes. We're very quick to pass those mistakes on to our coworkers, to our employees, to other departments. If you're an international company, to another country, rather than taking the responsibility that, hey, I messed up. You also can celebrate other people without being insecure, truly celebrating people for having good ideas, for moving up, for succeeding. And you're able to take a little bit of a step back without fear. Give up a little bit of that control. Break down those silos within your organization. And that's incredibly powerful. Something my boss has said to me recently that I've been thinking on and reflecting on. And I think it holds a lot of weight. Build networks, not empires. The world has enough loud leaders. So we need anchored ones. We need leaders who don't chase applause. Leaders who don't crumble when the metrics dip. Leaders who don't sacrifice integrity for short-term validation. Leadership isn't about being impressive. It's about being stable. It's about being the person that everyone can come to because they know you're going to solve the problem. And maybe you don't have the solution, but you're going to help them find it. And it comes from identity. So here's the reflection for you this week. What's actually driving your leadership? Is it fear, ego, approval, or scarcity? Or is it security? And if you've never asked yourself where security comes from, maybe it's time. For me, that answer is simple. I don't have to earn my worth. I don't have to outperform to matter. I don't have to prove I belong. I lead from identity, not for it. And that shift changed everything for me. If you can anchor your leadership in something deeper than performance, you won't just become more effective, you become a little bit more free. You become a lot more free. And free leaders build healthy organizations. So take this week to evaluate not just what you're building, but what's building you. Because the foundation always shows up eventually. And the strongest leaders are the ones who know exactly who they are long before anyone else has to tell them. Stay with me as we go through this series. Like, subscribe, leave your comments, leave your thoughts. Let's have some discussions and let's continue to grow together.